Recording in progress.
Recorded. Got it. Okay.
And then don't forget to screen share.
Right. Right. Should be sharing now.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, sweet. Be all good to go. How do I hide this little bar at the top?
You can't really. You just gotta.
It'll go away.
Yeah.
There. Okay. Sweet. Yeah. All right. Good to go. Without further ado, hello everybody. My name is Jackson Rygiel. I've been the lead designer at Matryoshka Games for 2 years now, and I guess we're gonna jump right in. This is creating a video game world, and the game in question that I've been working on is Expedition Agartha. So I'm just gonna show you a quick trailer just so that you are familiar with the game I'll be talking about. I'm just going to post the link in the chat so that everybody can watch the video themselves. Let me just do that real quick. And then I'll also play it up here so you can hear, from your computer. How does that work? Sweet. All right.
Do them for the lives of your mercy.
Okay, great. So that is Expedition Agartha. It is available. You can play it. It has been available for a few months. I'll get into a little more of the timeline later on. Um, but if you guys can see these little icons towards the bottom, Matryoshka in the middle, that is me. And then or that is the company that I'm working for right now. That's the developers down there. And then we have Wandering Wizard, our publisher, who's been publishing us for many years now. So it's great. It's been great. So I'll tell you the timeline if I can maximize this. So the timeline, basically, give you a quick rundown about what it has been like starting this project and whatnot. Let's see. So about 2.5 years ago, my friend and I, we brainstormed a game pretty much from scratch. You can pretty much make any game you want really nowadays. All you need is a guy on Fiverr to make your prototype. That's pretty much how we did it. In the beginning, we spent some money to hire this dude on Fiverr, and he came up with a prototype. A couple months later of working on that prototype and pitching it, we sold it. We sold the pitch, I guess, not the game, to a publisher. And it was great because it was a publisher that my friend had met at PAX East. So gaming conventions, one way of networking. And so we've been working on the game for about 2 years now. And it's been going really well. Every month we have deliverables, the publisher funds the game, and everybody's happy. And about 5 months ago, we put the game on Steam and did a full release and everything. It's in early access right now. And it was an interesting story. It was a huge success, when we launched 5 months ago. Twitch, 11,000 viewers, we had thousands of sales. It was popping. It was popping for a while. It started to go down, and us developers were pretty scared because we're like, well, this game is dying quickly, and we're going to need more funding if we want to keep it alive. And luckily, it doesn't quite. It really is, circumstantial. It doesn't quite matter if the players are going down in your game because the publisher saw the initial success and wanted to keep funding us. And so here we are today. And yeah, so I'll give you a quick elevator pitch about what the game actually is. If you couldn't piece it completely together from the YouTube video, it is kind of like Escape from Tarkov, and but medieval. And if you don't know what Escape from Tarkov is, then a more broadly known game is Fortnite. It's kind of like Fortnite, but except if you can take stuff into the world with you and bring items out with you. It's kind of one of those extraction survival games. But yeah, so medieval setting. It's got a cartoony aesthetic. And how did we actually make this? So throughout the talk I'm going to give today, I'm going to be doing some pretty broad stuff, like saying broad general tips to help get you started, like making a video game world, having an idea in your head and actually practically putting it into a game. And then I'm also going to talk about minute stuff, like these development tools that we use for anybody who just, is already, making games and they just want to know how to do it better or do it a different way. So we use Discord actually to communicate. It's a great tool. Everybody uses it nowadays. And we do pretty much all of our development inside of all of our talking and meetings inside of Discord. It's great. We've got about like 5 full times on right now, and we do a lot of contract work. So we give people, from all over the states, from all over the world, really work. And so, yeah, and it all comes together in the game using Plastic SCM. That's your source control management. And that is kind of like, it's like GitHub if you're not familiar with source control, but yeah, and that allows multiple people to work on the project at once, which is really nice. And then we built it an Unreal engine. And the reason why we picked Unreal is because we wanted to really go big. We had just graduated college and we wanted to make like a full 3D game with proper lighting and everything. And so we picked Unreal because it's one of the best engines for making this particular kind of game. So it's going to be tough making a game that's multiplayer and has all these elements in. I was talking with my friend as we were brainstorming this, but somehow 2 years later we managed to pull something off. And so I'm going to give you a brief rundown about the core gameplay of the game. I'm going to talk a little bit about the lore and narrative that we have in our world to keep players interested, the different levels, characters, loot, and progression that is in Agartha to keep players interested in coming back for more. So we have the lore, which is super important for some people, not really important for other people. But regardless, it is really, really good to have in your game if you're trying to create a game such as ours. With, a world, we wanted the world to be its own character. We wanted players to see things in the world and correlate them with stories. So we actually have lootable objects like books and whatnot that players can read and correlate events that they're seeing with their eyes to stories that they can read. And so we've got a lot of lore in the game. I think we have maybe 200 little pamphlets or little books that you can read along the world. Yeah, even if it's not important to a lot of players, it's still just really important to have that subconsciously so that it just really makes the world feel that much more, even if a player walks up to a book and they look at the text for a half a second, and they say, nope, there's still that element that the world is bigger than themselves. You know what I'm saying? So it's good to have those little treats in there for players who enjoy them, and even for players who don't. So how am I doing on time, by the way? 30 minutes left. How long has it been?
How long is it going?
Yeah, how long is the presentation? Okay, great. So half an hour left. Oh, like how? Oh, we've got until about 5. Gotcha. Okay, so I guess I'll go through here relatively quickly so we can get to Q&A. So levels, we have levels in the game. We have about 5 levels right now. We have this beach level that you see. There's the death maze, the ancient caverns, and it goes just deeper and deeper, and the levels get harder and harder, and the loot gets better and better, and the enemies get more difficult and more difficult. That the classic progression and whatnot. So this is our starter island. We juiced this island to the max because this is players' first experience. This is their first 4 seconds in the game. So this level got juiced. You can see we've got all these dynamic events. We've got things going off. We want to make sure that the first 4 seconds of actual gameplay is engaging, and and that players are having a good time on their first expedition. And it's really important to get that right the first time as players jump into your world. Characters. So we've got different characters in our game. We've got different NPCs. For our type of game, we've got 6 NPC merchants. You can level each of them up. So they've got quests along with them. And that lends into progression as well. Again, with lore and quests, players sometimes like quests, sometimes don't like quests. Some players just want to hop in and swing swords. Some players want to actually feel like they're role playing and do quests and read lore and all of that. So we've got our characters set up there if they want to interact with them or not. Again, it's just another one of those world building things that makes the world just feel a lot more alive. Loot. So probably wouldn't be as exciting if you didn't have all of this juicy loot in our levels. We have about like 2,000 lootable objects, each one of them hand placed, like these boxes you see here. And as the levels get harder, the loot gets better. We have, different colored tiers for loot to, because it's always nice seeing that random rare blue or gold color. So the classic loot progression system is there. We've got basically like all these merchants that I was just talking about: Omar, Kasha, Maximus. We have a hub world that basically is there for the player to have a breather when they're not going out and fighting. It's a safe area. There's no attacking. I would say it's pretty good to have that in a game as well, to control the flow. Flow of a game is really important. You don't want players at 100% all the time. And so we wanted to have like a nice chill area where players can just, I don't know, kind of upgrade their base and interact with these different characters that we have in our hub world. And yeah, I'll wrap it up early because I did want to get to Q&A, because I think that is just better for everyone. And we can talk about things that you guys are more interested in. So yeah, I guess I will just open it up for Q&A if you guys had any specific questions you wanted to ask, if you wanted to know more about. Yeah.
Okay, so
Maybe I should.
The game is, you have just one singular party on the expedition, or?
Yeah, so he asked, do we have like one singular party on the expedition? So it's multiplayer. There are 12 players spawning in the world in one map, basically. And the point of the game is to get from one side of the island to the other. And all along the edges of this map here, we have spawners that spawn human players, multiplayer kind of deal. And then you can get into a party with 2 of your friends. So it can also be co-op. So you might run into parties of 3, parties of 2, and you can be a solo player. We have other maps coming out with different game modes. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Is there any?
I guess following up on that.
Yeah.
So far, the biggest thing that in terms of like game design in Battle Royale is map design and how you control interaction and essentially creating a favorable or not a favorable, like a balanced kind of situation. Especially like in Apex, you find like you definitely have better advantage in high grounds, and in certain maps that have too much open space.
Yeah.
And so that would result in really nowhere to hide and much open ground battle.
Right.
In a game like this where from my understanding it's mostly melee.
Yeah, mostly melee.
Mostly melee.
Yeah.
How do you go about designing your maps? You can get as specific as you like.
Sure. Yes.
Just I don't know, even this layout right now, you can just go.
Okay. Yeah, of course. So basically he was comparing the game to Apex, and he said, when you're making a level, you have to take into consideration a lot of things. The level actually has to, as you're building out your level, you really have to keep in mind your gameplay, what your players are doing, the sight lines you talked about, like open areas and whatnot. So for a melee game like this, I wanted the sight lines much more closed off, because in games like Fortnite or Tarkov, sight lines, you have much wider open spaces. And with this, because you have guns who can shoot snipers across the map and whatnot, with this game, because it's primarily melee, I did want it to be more maze-like, to give the players who are just starting, and maybe the players who are numerically disadvantaged, like if you're going in solo, you can hide in certain places, and it's more crawly. So it's not like just this big open field where players are going to be chasing you. There are areas where you can run into enemies, and the enemies on the map will focus the players chasing you. So it's easy to lose them there. So yeah, a lot of consideration went into making the map and having the best experience for the player, basically. Yeah, and there were some challenges that we had to do because it was melee. We're switching over to melee. So yeah, I hope I answered your question there.
I mean,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
It depends more on the amount of player you play for the amount of player you gaming more than any other like the single player. So like how does that work? Like how do you keep attracting new player with the offline game?
Yes, that's a really good question. You're asking about player retention. So having people actually playing your game is important. If there's nobody playing a multiplayer game and the maps are dead, then it's not going to be fun. Is that what you're asking? R- right.
It's typical in like smaller
Right. Yeah. So player retention is huge. This probably goes more into marketing and the pricing of the game. There is like a lot of considerations to be made when looking at exactly why your players are leaving. This is a whole topic in itself. There's a lot of things that we personally have been doing to try to keep player retention. We have a lot of big projects in the works. We have a tutorial level that we're making to ease players in, to actually get them to keep playing the game. And then there's also, so like the first, you know, 30 minutes of the game, the first 10 seconds of the game, have to be really important to immerse players in the world. A lot of players might just launch your game, see something jank, and then refund it on Steam and get their money back. That's happened. And so, yeah, hooking players in the beginning is good for player retention. And then when a game tanks, like our game inevitably did, there are still options for multiplayer games when they have a declining player base. You can go free to play. You can um, you can introduce cosmetics so that players can, still pay money to like look good in your game. There's a lot of different ways you can bring like a player base back for a multiplayer game, for sure. Right. Modding is a great way. Yeah. What was the other thing you said? Modding and like right. Right. So our game Agartha is special in that we have a basically we have to control cheating. We have to control a lot of things about the game. So I don't know if you're familiar with Escape from Tarkov, or if not Escape from Tarkov, then uh other battle royale games where we have to preserve like the economy and whatnot. And since we are somewhat of a smaller team, making new, I guess, like modding tools and whatnot, it would be a lot of uh be a lot to, I guess, try to implement that into the game. Um yeah.
Yeah, one more thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that much about the game, but what is driving its like combat or conflict? What's like, so for example, Fortnite, you have a circle that eventually that's reducing
Right.
the player space, so essentially driving them into combat. So what is the I guess the factor here that's driving conflict?
Yes, so he's asking what is driving the actual combat in the game, the conflict in the game. So in games you have a circle closing. That is a fantastic way of getting combat out of people. And
So you have that.
no, in our game we do not have a circle in closing. It's just this open map. It's different because we're not exactly pushing combat and stressing players out with the circle encroaching. If players just want to like rat and go through the map looting and stealthing and not going into combat, that's certainly a viable way, and we let them do that. So if players want to do that, they can. But we also have enticing things in the game. We have enticing areas in the game, such as these smokestacks. So hotspots, like play areas with really hard enemies but really good loot. So we want players to choose. Basically, we're not driving anything. So if new players want to rat through and gather a bunch of materials and whatnot and leave the map, they can do it for their first few raids. But if you want to get the good stuff in the game and you want to progress, we have that there for you as well. It's a lot more open-ended than games. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, when does the thing end?
When does the game end? Well, it doesn't really. There is a progression. So you go through this map. You
Like in the sense that when do you finish the map?
When you finish a map, yeah. So there isn't really a hard progression on that. Even it's more like you can go into any one of these maps. It's just we have certain maps that are, I guess, quote unquote, later, like harder maps that players, if a player collected a bunch of really good gear from this map, they might be kitted out with like armor and sword and whatnot, and they might be able to tackle the harder maps. And now if you go onto the harder maps, I guess I should say there's a really crucial mechanic where if you die, you do lose everything on your body that you have. So I guess that's very typical for games like this. And so, the idea is to just keep going on to harder and harder levels with harder enemies. So your chance of dying is,
Can you save and just exit?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you can leave whenever you want, really. We have it like a reconnect.
Keep a consistent number of players.
How do you keep it a consistent number of players on the map? No. So at the beginning of the map, we have just 12 players spawn. pretty much. So map starts, 12 players spawn around the outside. The map lasts for 30 minutes. At the 25-minute mark, we spawn in a ton of hard enemies. The map actually goes a full day-night cycle from morning to nighttime over the course of half an hour. So at 5 minutes before it ends, we spawn a lot of hard enemies to basically tell players to get the hell out of the map because it's closing soon. And then 5 minutes after that, we just kill everything on the map and just shut down the instance pretty much.
And so you have to get out.
So you have to get out. Yeah. So you spawn on one side of the map. And then if you see that orange smoke in the background, you can progress through the map, and that is your exit point. That is your extract point. So that's all you have to do. Basically just spawn in on one side of the map and just get to the orange smoke without dying. That's all we, you know. So, yep.
Question from someone in chat, Steven, question about the level design.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, Steven, you mentioned having the level on screen be a maze with lots of line of sight blockers. Is this approach for every level? Yes, this is the approach for every level. Good question. We do have levels that get a little more interesting. We have levels that open up a lot more. We have levels with fog, with heavy fog, so that inherently will block. Thanks, Iobit. That fog will inherently block players' visions. But yeah, generally across all of the maps, I try to keep it as rat mazy as I can, just because of that melee aspect. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Lane.
So when you're dealing with a map as big as this, could you talk more about your process from like start to finish? So like when are you using your like big brush tools to paint trees?
Yes.
Moving through with a fine tooth comb and then like set dressing.
Yes, of course. That's a really good question. So Lane just asked, like, practically, how do you make this thing in Unreal Engine? How do you build this map? You know, from start to finish. How do you light it? When do you put stuff in and whatnot? So how I build out maps is basically I don't have one way of doing it, but practically there are some things that you kind of have to do in order. So for an overworld map like this, a map with like a sky, you know, you've got trees and it's a natural looking environment, I'll start with a landscape. And basically the landscape, I'll either import from a world builder, from a tool. Basically there's other software programs that you can use to give you a height map. Now we're getting technical. And then you can project that height map onto a large sheet of geometry, and it basically, like, the black spots represent divots in the map. The white spots, it looks like a big noise map. The white spots represent the peaks of the map. And so that's a really easy way of creating a supernatural looking map right off the bat. But yeah, landscape is going to be first for me. And then it's a mixture really of static meshes and foliage. The trees you see, the palm trees, the pine trees towards the center, those are all foliage tools. So instead of having to hand place every one of these palm trees, which would be an absolute nightmare, there are brush-like tools in the Unreal Engine that you can just paint trees all over your map. There's also other procedural tools that you can use to spawn, say, grass wherever you have like a grass layer. It spawns grass foliage. So there's a ton of ways of building a world to scale like this. A ton of really great tools that you can use to quickly build out these levels. And yeah, it really just takes practice, really messing around with the tools. Unity has got something very similar. This this applies to both Unity and Unreal. So if you're building a game in Unity as well, that is similar to this. And yeah, it's really just a combination of, let's see. Oh, we just got a new chat. So yeah, and then here, let's see, I'll get to that question in a second. The lighting is important too. We used Unreal because the lighting we thought was pretty good. That's what we wanted for this kind of game. Another thing is that the Unreal Marketplace is a terrific tool. This might be a controversial topic, but I would say if you have a chance to use content from Marketplace, I would go all for it. Do not feel like you are cheating. There is artistry in using content from marketplaces. And another thing is that a ton of really successful games right now use content from marketplace assets. It's kind of funny. My friend and I play games, and a lot of the times we will see if it's an Unreal game, there will be at least something from the Unreal Marketplace in there, like in any game we play. It's kind of crazy. We just got another question. Traversal, one of your core mechanics, or is it the means to get from A to B? Or is it the means to get from A to B? Let me see if I'm understanding your question correctly. Traversal.
I can elaborate a little bit. I feel like I could have phrased it better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you like that.
No, it's kind of
yeah.
cool. You just popped up. What's up?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come to talk to us. I'm a
Oh, thanks for having me.
for an Unreal game, and we're seeking funding as well. So I'm really, really relating to a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm working on a game that's got sandbox elements now. And one thing we talk about a lot is we really love games where it's more than just like the player imposing their will on the world. Like when you go through the level kind of pushes back at you. Like when you go and explore, there are like dangers for you and stuff like that. And I was just wondering if you had any sandbox elements like that, where the player is going to be like engaged, even if they're just walking around, or is the point really just to go from A to B and have that really cool objective that you mentioned, which is get to the smoke without dying?
Yes. That's a great question. We want the map to be as engaging as possible. We want players to be amazed and not understand a lot of the map. Because when a player understands the map, they leave. That's it. We want the map to be mysterious, always showing you new things. And so recently we've actually been doing more of that. We've added dynamic events. So every time a map spawns, there's a new dynamic event to keep it fresh for players. And again, as I was saying to another audience member, the points of interest also correlate to gameplay. So these little smoke plumes that you see all over the island, they're hotspots, so players can go there, encounter super hard enemies at their own will, of course. At the hard areas, there's even a boss, like a super hard enemy AI. And if you kill the boss, he drops a key, which unlocks a really good chest with a ton of good loot at the same area. And it's interesting, if you want to get technical, the way we built it out was using Unreal's sub-levels, which is a super useful tool if you want to have like whole chunks of the map turn off and turn on dynamically. Sub-leveling is a great way to go about doing that. You said you're building out the game in Unreal Engine. Another super useful tip is that if you're using source control management, those sub-levels, you can have players work on different sub-levels at the same time, and it'll all be added to this one persistent world. That gets it's very easy to set up in Unreal, but yeah, that's what we've been doing for sure.
That was great. Thank you.
Oh, for sure. Let's see. Yeah. Right, of course. So the question was, how am I involved with this project? What do I do on the project? What's my role? So about 2.5 years ago, my friend and I sat down and we thought up about the world on like cocktail napkins. And then since that time, 2.5 years ago, I have had to wear a lot of hats because if it's just the two of you, you kind of have to build the whole world out. You have to build everything, the UI, the lighting. You have to be in charge of a lot of different stuff. And so my primary tasks as of right now today is making sure that the map is built. So I'm in charge of basic and adding new stuff to the map. So level designer is my primary role, but I also work with different teams. If I can move my slides 1 sec. We've got different teams. We have contractors and we also have interns that are from my college, Drexel in Philadelphia. So we have different teams for these different pillars of our game here. And so I kind of manage those teams and make sure they're going well. So we have a couple of guys doing loot, and they go around and change all the loot in the game. We have like 2,000 loot boxes, all of various, degrees of rarity and whatnot. And so we have players and we're designing like dead body loot containers. So like all this different stuff. And then we have people doing characters. We have dynamic characters all over the map that like talk to you and say weird stuff. And so I'll organize a team to basically get all of the characters and voice lines and all the things that the player hears or interacts with, in the map. And we'll put that in a sub level. We've got all of our characters in one sub level, and it just basically loads in. And then we've got all the loot on another sub level. So it's all very, compartmentalized. And then the levels I actually build out myself, and from start to finish. So I could talk about like level design and creating levels all day long. And then we have a whole lore team too. And we have like one person that implements all of our lore objects. And yeah, so basically that's what's going on. My day-to-day is like I'm building out a level physically, like putting walls together and like placing objects in the world for players to traverse, and then also making sure that these pillars are in place by managing different little sub teams. So yeah, that's what's going on.
All
right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Gotcha. Okay. So the floor and the ceiling is the question. If people don't know what floor and ceiling means, you're talking about skill, right? Like skill floor and skill ceiling. So the skill ceiling in the game, we have different roles. That's a good way of ensuring that players of all skill levels can make sure it can enable them to play and still have fun. We have like different weapons that require more skill. So basically we want a good, skill ceiling, but we don't want it like terribly high so that players, just stand no chance. We basically let's see. Speaking more about skill ceiling and floor, there are a lot of ways. Yeah, there's no one way. So another like hard mechanic we have in the game to deal with skill floor and skill ceiling is if you just like do quests and just play the game and level up your NPCs, your skill floor will like you won't have to be as skillful. You'll just gradually raise your skill floor because NPCs will be selling really good loot if you do quests for them. So you can like manually raise your skill floor just by playing the game, basically. For a player who's like super skillful, they've done this game before a million times, they don't even need to touch NPC quests. They can go right in and start using any weapon and be skillful. So basically we just want, the most amount of players playing our game, but we also want it to be fair. So we have just a bunch of different maps and modes that are tailored for players, a bunch of different weapons, a bunch of different play styles. We have a skill tree that we're implementing soon. So that can also, more avenues, more ways of being skillful and outwitting your enemies and whatnot. Yes, so the combat is exactly what you described. WASD, move around with your mouse. It's like Skyrim combat, pretty much. It's like Chivalry, Mordhau, any one of those melee fighting games. Obviously, the fighting mechanics are a little different, and we could get into detail. But yeah, primarily it is like mouse movement, click, and then you've got. It's not very RPG. You haven't got like a bunch of skills and whatnot. You've got items you can use, you can eat, you can drink. It gives you buffs. You've got different potions you can take to heal you, but you're limited to 4 on your hot bar. You have a little hot bar down at the bottom. But yeah, no skills. You have F, which is kick, which can be replaced with other skills like super sprint or jump for 10 seconds, but we're still implementing that. So yeah, it's not really a skill, like I guess, ability game, I guess. Oh yeah, no, we wanted it to be more immersive, more like, I guess, grounded than that. So it's not very arcadey where you have to put in multiple key presses and inputs at the same time. That level of dexterity is not needed to basically play and enjoy the game and feel like you're good at it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you hit 5 o'clock.
Sweet.
Jackson, thanks so much for giving us
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. All right. Thank you guys in chat.
Thank you, Jackson.
Thank you very much. All right.